Welcome to the Spotlight series. On today's episode, we have Peter Cook. Peter Cook is the CEO of Thought Leaders and the Dean of Thought Leader Business School. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Peter Cook is obsessed with helping clever people be commercially smart. He works with experts, coaches and consultants, helping them become recognised as thought leaders in their field. He's a speaker and mentor and running his own Thought Leaders practice. He's a best-selling author with 6 books under his belt and another 2 on the way. Overachiever much. These include Implement, the Thought Leaders Practice and the E-Myth Bookkeeper, which he co-authored with Michael Gerber. So it's an honour to have you on the show. Thanks, Pete, for coming along.
Yeah, great to be here. Nice to see you, Renee.
Great to see you too. So when we met about 10 years ago, both of us were in very different places. Yeah, I know. Scary. Way to make us feel old. So when we met about 10 years ago, we were in completely different places with our businesses. I'm wondering if we could just start off with your journey from where you were at with running Love Your Business and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think it's great to actually reflect on that. I think there's something really cool about people who are been sticking at this for a while, that it doesn't just kind of magically happen. For some people maybe it does, but for most of us it actually takes a while to hit on a formula that works. And I'm in the game.
Yeah. Especially for those of us who don't like to be told what to do.
Yes. Yeah, cyclists, professional cyclists talk about miles in the legs.
Yes.
And so there's nothing else that counts for more than just how many miles you've got in your legs. And the people who have been training for riding 500 kilometres a week for a decade, there's kind of no shortcut for that.
Yes.
And I think it's the same with this, actually having done time, having things that have failed, having run lots of coaching sessions, been in front of lots of rooms, tried lots of different ideas, is generally what it takes. It's not an overnight game.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Good. You make me feel like I haven't done it the hard way.
I think we have. Like, I look up for myself, I think I have done it the hard way, but actually there is no other way.
Yes. Yeah. I love
and
that.
I actually needed those lessons. Yeah. Sorry.
Let's go back to Love Your Business.
Yes.
Where you started. Well, where you're at when I met you anyway, and I know you had to. You can go back further back if you like.
But no, that's quite far enough. So I left the corporate world at maybe 27 or something. I was a consultant at Accenture, and I was looking down the path to partnership and thinking I could see the rest of my life disappearing on this conveyor belt. And knew that I didn't want that, but the kind of the suck of it was there. And so I saw a business coach to help me work out what else I could do.
Right.
And I was working with fabulous lady Bernadette, and got to thinking, I actually wouldn't mind that job. How do you get that job? That looks like a pretty cool thing to do, have these great conversations. And with all the ignorance and arrogance of youth, I was like, well, I've never been a coach and I've never run a business. I think I'll be a business coach. How hard could that be?
How hard could it be?
Yes. Luckily, I didn't then know half the things I know now, or I never would have got started.
I think, ignorance is what a great, it's a great benefit when you're starting out, isn't it?
Yeah.
In business and parenting.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
2 things that no one would ever start if they actually knew what was involved. And yes, and so I went out and started telling people I'm a business coach, and this was in 2000. So a lot of people didn't even know what a business coach was. So it's kind of a new thing. And so I'm knocking on doors saying to people, how'd you like to hire me as a business coach? Oh, what's that? Oh, no, I've actually never done it before. No, I haven't had a business either, but I reckon I'd be pretty good at it. What do you say? And so I had
brilliant marketing.
Yeah, it was.
I love the personal branding you threw in there too.
Yes, and so I had a year of this without kind of getting that far. And I remember like my 5th month in, I think I made $400 for the month. And I'm thinking, what have I done?
Hey, that's more than most coaches ever make. So
yeah, that's another whole conversation. And then I think eventually the universe just started to recognize my persistence and said, this guy's just not going away, is he? All right, let's throw him a bone. And so I got a couple of clients, and then my second year, turnover about $100,000, which is in the coaching world pretty good. So that was kind of at the top of what a lot of coaches were making then. Still, compared to the corporate world I'd come from, not that great, and definitely not what I would have been paid as a partner. And so, and my coaching business is called Love Your Business. And because I was teaching all these people how to grow a business, I thought I had to be doing that too. To be congruent with my message, I thought I had to be growing my own business. So I franchised my business, spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and I sold 5 franchises, had 5 Love Your Business franchisees, none of which worked. And so I ended up buying them all back. I gave them all their money back because the stuff actually wasn't good enough yet to franchise. My material, my system wasn't that good. wasn't good enough for someone else to use and make money. And I then hired coaches, subcontracted coaches, and at one point had 10 coaches working for me up and down the east coast of Australia, and beautiful office in Melbourne, in Fitzroy, and PA working for me. And it looked fantastic. The whole operation looked...
It was a great location.
It was beautiful. And it was this beautiful office. It had 4 floors, and it had these amazing spaces, and we're paying $50,000 a year to lease this office, which is ridiculous for what we were doing. And even though it looked fabulous, I still wasn't making more than 100, 120K a year. I'm working really, really hard to do it. So trying to look after my own clients, look after the team, find enough business for everyone else to do. And it got to a point where I realised I wasn't loving my business, which is kind of hard when my business is called Love Your Business.
Yes.
And 2009, went on a holiday, went to Bali with my wife Trish, and we went for a week because that was as long as I could be away from the business without the wheels falling off.
Yeah.
And so it was 9 days. It was a weekend on each side of a week, and we were staying on this beautiful beach right up on the northeast coast of Bali, and it was this little hut on the beach, and it had a veranda and a day bed, and we're actually sleeping on the day bed. So we were sleeping outside on the veranda, and we'd see the sun coming up and the fishing boats coming in the morning. And I had this moment of clarity, this insight, where I remembered back when I was at uni, I could have a 2-month holiday. Now that I was a successful entrepreneur, 1 week was all I got. And I thought to myself, there's something really wrong with this picture and how I've designed my business. And so I made a decision that I was going to change my business so that I could come back to Bali for 2 months.
You could be a uni student again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the decision was something had to change, and the measure of that was being able to come back to Bali for 2 months. And that was in May. And then for the rest of the year, everything was driven by that decision. Right. So when our office, the lease was up for our office a few months later, and I didn't renew the lease, and all the coaches that were working the business, I let them all go. I let my PA go, and came back to just me and just the half a dozen clients who were my favourite clients. And one of the things I realised in all of that is the thing that I enjoyed doing the most was coaching the clients. It wasn't running the business. It wasn't Monday morning meetings and recruiting and management and performance reviews, and that whole business game wasn't what got me juiced. I actually much preferred doing the coaching and working with the clients. And so then that December and January, we went back to Bali, and I'd set up my clients so they were happy to work on the phone. I hadn't worked like that before, but I set them all up to work on the phone. And I ended up in Bali working 1 day a week with a mobile phone and a laptop by the pool.
Awesome.
And making more money than I was working 6 days and stressed to my eyeballs with the whole catastrophe in Melbourne. Not the turnover was less, but the amount of money that I got was more. And I thought to myself, this is better.
Yes. Why overcomplicate? Yeah. Bigger is not always better.
Yeah. Yeah. And to the title of your podcast, a much more leveraged way, even though it kind of seems less leveraged coming back to just me in terms of my time and my lifestyle. It was a much more leveraged way of working with, essentially just me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the number of hours that you're required to work and the return on investment of those hours is higher when you're not worrying about all the overheads of a team and a fancy office and all that sort of stuff, which we don't really need as coaches and thought leaders. It's totally unnecessary. So let's look at actually tell us what your business looks like today, because it's has grown again multiple times since that point.
Yeah. So when I came back from Bali, someone said to me, what you're doing, that's a thought leaders practice, which I'd never heard of. He said, you've got to go and meet this guy, Matt Church, who runs a business called Thought Leaders. And I was like, okay then. And I went and met Matt and did it was a 2-day course then. And I just went, this is actually a thing. Someone's worked out how to do this. This whole time I've been thinking, you've got to grow a business because that's what we all hear and that's what we read about. But this idea of running a practice on your own as a thought leader that's a legitimate thing. And there's this whole community who are doing it and his methodology. And I was like, all right, so this is how to do it. And so then I bought into that whole approach and started launching different offerings that were based around me and my thinking and my IP, and then wrote the Thought Leaders Practice with Matt, the book. And now I still speak, and I still write and still mentor. I don't do any business coaching anymore. The only people that I work with are thought leaders. And I'm she said the CEO of Thought Leaders now. So I'm now Matt's partner in that and run Thought Leaders Business School. And so that's, my obsession now is helping clever people be commercially smart and helping thought leaders commercialize expertise.
That's great. I love that. So what does it take? I mean, what is a thought leader, firstly? Because it's, it's a term that's bandied around regularly these days. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for me, a thought leader is somebody who is extending the thinking in a particular field. It's a little bit like a PhD. So when you do a PhD, your job is to be across the whole domain. It's like any PhD starts with a literature review of what's the current thinking in that domain, and then your job is to just extend it in one direction. And I think it's the same for a thought leader. If you want to be a thought leader in leadership, you need to be across what is the thinking in leadership, and then pick one area that you're going to extend the thinking in, and what's your addition? What are you adding into the mix? And then but then there are thought leaders they're thought leaders in big companies and thought leaders running businesses. The thought leaders that you and I both work with specifically are thought leaders who are running a practice. So that's thought leaders who are on their own with 1 or 2 support staff. Then in our world, who make money by speaking, writing, training, mentoring, facilitating and coaching and consulting on their own.
Yeah, great. So for the people who are still consider themselves coaches who are listening, what's the difference between a coach and a thought leader, and how do you make the transition if that's where you want to go?
A coach, so a purist coach is kind of agenda neutral. So if you go to a coaching school, and learn to be a great coach or kind of a pure coach, you'll get taught how to ask great coaching questions, how to elicit the direction and the answers from the client. Coaching as a thought leader, coaching around your own IP is a little bit different. So there's, so if I was a purist coach, I would come in and I'd be just asking completely open-ended questions, saying, what's your vision? What are your blocks? What's the next step to do that? What could get in the way? If there's a whole bunch, lots of great coaching questions.
Yes, and it's kind of based on that premise that the client has all the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm coaching as an expert around my domain of expertise,
yes,
I would ask questions that come from my methodology and from my IP and my models. So one of our models is, we say, launch clusters, launch a combination of a message, a market, and a delivery method. Right. And so rather than being open-ended, I'd say, so what are the things you know about? And which of those are the most commercial? And how quickly could you go to market with that? And then which markets would pay for that? And how much would they pay? And which one could you get to soonest? And who do you know the most people in? And what would they buy? How would you package that up? And then I could kind of wrap it all up within my thinking. Right. So it's what I could say, leading the witness, Your Honour. Like, as a thought leader, I'm coming from a specific outcome.
Yes.
And I'm saying it's actually what I help people do is this.
Right.
In my case, I help people earn $500,000 to $1.5 million working 50 to 200 days with 1 or 2 support staff. And if I'm coaching you towards that outcome.
Great.
And only hire me as a coach if that's what you want.
Yes. And you've got a specific process that you take them through step by step.
Yep.
It's not kind of following the client off where they want to go today.
Yeah. Yep. So there's, I guess, the first step in going from a coach to running a thought leaders practice is making your coaching around your IP.
Yes.
And actually
that methodology.
Yeah. Doing some thinking first rather than just coming in kind of cold. When I started as a business coach, I didn't know. I'd worked as a consultant with a big consulting firm, so I knew some stuff, but I didn't know that much. And so I just ask a lot of questions and try to kind of help people. So I wasn't coaching as a thought leader. I was just a coach.
You're coaching.
By the end of doing that for a decade, I kind of knew a bit more. And so I would be also doing more mentoring than coaching. So as a mentor, that's much more telling people what they should do rather than just letting them get there themselves. But one of the things that lots of experts make is they get mode locked. So coaches, and this is what I did for a decade, just see themselves as a coach.
Yes.
And so they only do coaching. And it's very hard to make a lot of money just coaching.
Yeah.
Similarly, speakers who just see themselves as a speaker will only get booked to do speaking and kind of put a cap on themselves, and trainers and facilitators. And one of the other transitions from being a coach to running a thought leaders practice is saying that you're going to make money from speaking and authoring and training and mentoring and facilitating and coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like multifaceted. It's kind of, and being able to kind of switch between those as required too.
Yeah. And we say thought leaders major in thinking rather than in delivery.
Right.
So you do the thinking first, and if you do it, if you've got world-class IP, it's then very easy to turn that into a speech or a chapter of a book or a coaching session or a training module.
Yes.
But most of us come from whatever's our preference. So we design a coaching program, or we design a training program, or we design a speech, we write a speech, but we don't have thinking on its own that can then leverage out into any of those delivery modes.
So to talk a little bit about how do you guide people through doing that thinking, or, creating that methodology? What's your way of going about that?
Yeah, most people aren't taught to think, which is kind of ironic given how much education we get. But mostly, if we say to a coach or a thought leader, all right, go and do some thinking for an hour, they don't know what to do. And our default is to then think into a program that we're developing. And so what we do is try to create that IP, the intellectual property or your thinking, separate from the delivery. Right. And what we want to do is capture what's the advice that you give and then flesh it out a bit. So also have it, most of us have a preference in terms of being left brain or right brain or big picture or detailed.
Yes.
And our thinking will kind of go into that preference. So my preference is left brain detailed. So very concrete. So when I'm doing, like if I'm just left to my own, it'll be lots of bullet points and lots of evidence and lots of case studies. Right. And then I lose 3/4 of my audience because most people aren't like me. I don't think you're not in that.
Not the detail bit.
No. So what we want to do is then have a way of fleshing out our thinking so that as well as being in our preference, it's also, in my case, it's also big picture and it's also right brain. So we have what we call full spectrum thinking.
Great.
And capture your IP in a way that covers all of those.
Right.
And can then turn into whatever kind of program you want to sell.
Yeah. That's great. I'm so glad we're on the same page with that because I'm really big on creating the methodology. And, for me, once they can turn all that stuff that they know into a picture, you can put it in a diagram. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, models are very, very powerful, and models are one of the tools that we use in that process.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. It's one of my favorite parts of working with clients is developing those models. I just like go,
Yeah, and it's amazing how an idea, if you can add geometry to it, just suddenly light bulbs go off.
Yes. Yeah, because the way my brain works is as someone's speaking, if there's a lot of words coming in, because I'm not auditory, I'm trying to take the words and file them in filing cabinets in my brain and trying to sort them and chunk them as they're speaking. And I'm just like, if there's a lot of words coming, I get overwhelmed. So as soon as they can show me a diagram first and I can work out straight away where I'm filing them. I'm like, oh, okay, I can calm down now.
Yep.
I know how I'm filing things.
Yeah, and there's amazing authority too that's not necessarily justified, but you can put up a model and go, it works like this, and somebody goes, oh, wow.
They've got a diagram, it must be real.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's the same thing writing a book and being on a stage. They both come with a whole lot of extra kudos that's not necessarily earned, but we should take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say are the biggest lessons that you've learned so far on your journey as a thought leader?
Oh, big question.
I think that do you want me to go
no. It's a great question. I think it's a real personal development journey.
Yeah.
And people who are successful in this game, I think, have to overcome three things. The voice in our head that says, I'm not good enough. The voice in our head that says, I don't deserve this. And our dysfunction around money. I think everybody's dysfunctional around money, and I definitely am. And everybody, to a greater or lesser extent, battles these voices. And to be successful running a practice, there's nowhere to hide, and we need to overcome these to do that. So I think the biggest lesson for me has been about myself and how I go through those things.
Yeah. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So what's your secret to overcoming that? What is it what practices do you implement in your life to consistently overcome that stuff?
So initially, it's funny that when we teach people this, we don't deal with any of this stuff. So what we say is, people say, I need to work on my confidence. I need to work on my belief. We say, no. Go and sell something. Just go and sell something. Get yourself up get your income up and work on, we'll have that conversation on the other side of it. So the first part of the answer for me was actually being successful and building what we call a black belt practice.
Right.
Just a lot of stuff shifted in doing that. And
you have to get to black belt before you can overcome all that negative self-talk.
Well, it's interesting. Being a black belt doesn't help you get over that negative self-talk, and it and it took me another.
We can overcome some of that, or at least be functional beyond it.
Yeah, and it actually took me 2 years to recalibrate to being at black belt. So for the first 2 years, I've now been maybe 5 years running a practice at that level. And the first 2 years, I didn't believe it myself. I kept waiting for it to disappear.
Right.
I kept expecting someone to go, "Oh, Pete, your life's just back over there. You've accidentally slipped into this successful person's life. The real you's back over there." And then after 2 years, I went, "Okay, no, actually, I feel like this is where I live." And the answer I think that you were probably guessing is now a meditation practice, is the context of everything in my life. It's the thing that I do that helps me keep those voices a little quieter and then helps make everything I do better. Helps my practice, my speaking, my writing, my parenting, just how I live my life is all better with an effective meditation practice.
How often do you meditate? What does it look like?
For me, it's a minimum an hour a day.
Wow.
And I've done that now for coming up to 3 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I treat myself like I'm an alcoholic around this. So like an alcoholic can't have one drink. Mm-hmm. I don't let myself have one day where that drops off. Because as soon as and it means then there's no conversation about am I going to today or not, or how I fit it in, or it's now just a given. And so it's easier for me. My meditation teacher actually said 100% is easier than 99%.
Yes.
And if it's 100%, then there's no dialogue anymore. I wrote a blog maybe 5 years ago that was the no walking rule. And we both live in Eltham, which is a fairly hilly part of the world.
Yes.
And I run around these hills. And for me, when I was running, like the constant chatter in my head was, when am I allowed to walk? How far up I'll run up to that lamppost. And then there was this constant, like half my internal dialogue running was about when was I going to stop running?
Yes.
And then I made this no walking rule for myself.
So you just run everywhere?
Yeah, so I can run slowly. When I'm running, there's a no walking rule. It's not like I'm running. Okay, I'm not like Forrest Gump.
Going to the local cafe and you have to run.
No.
I was wondering why when you turn up, you're always a bit stinky. No, I was kidding.
Yes, running to every meeting, running to the car. Poor Scarlett's going, "Daddy, wait for me. Sorry, I've got to run."
No walking.
No, if I'm on a run, I don't walk.
Okay, good to clarify.
And for me, that just switched off that conversation. I can,
yes.
Like if it's up a steep hill, I'll run slower, but I'm not. There isn't a point where I'm going to be walking, and it just took that out of the equation. And so it's the same with my meditation practice.
I really like that, and I can feel it reflected in how we're approaching getting to school at the moment, just to go off track a bit. But I think it's good to, like, in terms of embedding a practice and embedding a habit. So last year we had this good intention to ride bikes to school.
Yep.
It happened maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
Because we're always running a bit too late, so we just get in the car.
Yeah.
Right. Now this year we ride bikes to school every day.
Yeah.
And we've done it, I think, every day except for one. We have a few more variables to play with.
Yeah. Yes.
But it is a shift in the mindset. It's like there's not a conversation about are we going to ride today or are we going to go in the car. It's helmets on, we're getting on our bikes. And that's sort of what I'm hearing in your meditation is it's not am I going to meditate today? It's I'm meditating. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not a conversation. It's a given.
Yep.
It's a good shift. And I think there are probably areas of our business, like if you were to apply that same mentality in your business as well, like are there things in your business where it's not an optional conversation, it's this is a given, I'm doing this in my business and that's just how it is?
Yeah, and I think for different stages there are different things, but it's definitely thinking.
Yes.
So actually, when we say thought leadership, it's not I had a thought once a ship. It's not thought repeatership. It's actually ongoing thinking. You can't kind of rest on your laurels on that. It's why, we say to people, write a book. And then they go, all right, I've done my book. And then we're like, well, actually, we lied. Sorry. It's actually 5 to 10 books. So it's not, you don't get to stop thinking.
Yes.
And publishing, so you have to keep getting it out there in whatever form. Reading, I don't think you can be an expert without consuming other expertise.
Yes.
And sales activity, you've got to. That's the other constant that's always got to be there, is doing. Yeah, we say there's 3 jobs for a thought leader running a practice: think, sell, deliver.
Yes.
And you always have to be doing all of them. And the mistake a lot of people make is they'll sell successfully and then they'll get really busy delivering.
And stop thinking.
And stop thinking and stop selling.
Right.
And so they'll get a big contract and they'll go 3 months flat out delivering. And then they get to the end of it and they're like, and so we see so many people are kind of feast and famine.
Right.
And whose revenue looks like this, because they're not constantly doing all 3 and having those 3 things be a non-negotiable in the practice all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway, and I'm kind of think because I'm very kind of I'm a steam train. I'm kind of one tracked, and I'm finding myself at the moment. I love the creation process. I'm lucky that I'm at this stage in my business where pretty much I create the content and someone else does all the rest with it. And I am my 3 jobs now are the thinking, delivery, and the selling. To put it in your language. However, I do find that whilst, in the last couple of weeks, I'm totally immersed in recording interviews and loving that. And sure, if a lead comes along, I'll be on a call and having a consultation, but I'm not actively pursuing that at the moment. So I think it's an interesting, important thing to remember, is spinning those 3 plates at the same time.
Yeah, and I remember when I first started to work with Matt Church, my partner, that really kind of opened my eyes to what's possible in terms of how productive to be and how to do all these things. And I used to think that if I was running a 2-day workshop, that was kind of a week's work, because the day before I'd need to be getting ready, and I had this story in my head that it takes a lot of energy to be in front of a room for 2 days, and so then I'd have a day recovery afterwards.
Yes.
And so that would be kind of my week if I was running a 2-day program. And then I got to see Matt running this amazing 2-day program that compared to what I'd been doing, I thought this was like the pinnacle of what you could deliver. And I remember this day where he came in, so the day started at 9 and he came in at 7 and recorded an hour of content for something else first. So he got the video cameras out and he recorded an hour.
Wow.
And then he did this amazing day training, but he had 2 sales meetings booked at lunchtime. So these 2 different people came in and actually met with him at lunchtime in the middle of this day. And then we got to the end of the day and found out that the audio hadn't recorded. So he'd done it. For the videos in the morning. Right. And he's like, oh, God damn it. All right. And he went back out the back room and recorded the hour again.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay. That's different. That's what doing them all looks like. And
yes.
So, yeah, and getting things done in the cracks.
Yeah, that takes shifting for me.
Yeah, for me too. It was a whole different paradigm. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter. You have shared so much amazing brilliance as always. Thank you so much for coming along to be on the show. I really appreciate having you here. And you've been listening to Peter Cook.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Pete.